You know what quietly brave? Finishing a sentence when no one's clapping for you. Writing that thing down when the word is itself not very loud, but your doubt is louder, and the only proof you have is a pull to keep going. Today, we are talking about the real writing journey, not just the finished book, but the invisible moments that shaped it. Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, the space where we make everyday mental health feel practical, human, and doable. I am Sayan, as some of you would know, and today I'm joined by Richard Spegel. We are diving into Richard's books, his writing journey, and the inspirations behind the work of why his work came to life at all, but also what writing does to a person, how it deals, how it challenges you, and how it changes your relationship with your own inner world. So, Richard, it's a pleasure to have you here with, I would say, among us today. And I'm quite curious to know what really happens into, that writer's world when, he's still jotting his thoughts down or penning down. So it's a pleasure to have you here with me today.
Oh, well, thank you again for having me. Nice to be here.
Yeah, likewise. So, Richard, before we kind of get into the books or the inspiration behind the same, uh, I'm curious as to, what did writing first give you that you didn't know you needed at that time? What is so special about writing for you, if I ask?
I've been writing since high school, and I did it as a way to, in some ways, entertain myself. I had all these ideas. I wanted to put them down on paper, and I felt very underserved. I couldn't find a lot of books in the genres that I like that were geared for adults, and I like to read more mature content, something that makes you think. So I just started writing it myself, and I had been doing that off and on for like 20 years.
Mm. And so, I mean, what are some of books that inspired you early on in your days? I mean, would love to hear.
Well, I say Anne Rice. She's like the big person I can think of as far as like vampire entertainment and lore. I really enjoyed her books when I was growing up. It's just that after her, there was Elba. Everything since her has been geared for like children, but I wanted something for an adult, and I couldn't find anything else. So that's why I started writing my own. I've also read a lot of science fiction. David Weber and John Ringo were very inspirational to me, making me want to kind of like cross into that genre as well, which I'll be doing this year.
Wow, that's interesting. So, I do not classify myself as bookworm as such, but I think it's kind of impressive to hear what kind of books or content or genres did inspire you in the beginning, and how is that different? I mean, is it the still genre that you work out with? I mean, that you started out with. Is it the still genre, or have has it, I would say, evolved in some way or the other? So what's your take on that?
Well, as far as genre goes, my Eternal Night series is a little complicated. People say like paranormal and occult because there's vampires in it, but I never thought of it that way because my vampires are just kind of like normal people living their lives. I mean, it does get pretty dark, but it's dark in a mature sense. My Wolves and Ravens trilogy is pure fantasy. I should say it's considered dark fantasy because of how brutal it is. And that genre's pretty much stayed the same for me.
Wow, that's nice to hear. So, I think we are getting to know you a bit from the genres that inspired you and the genres you penned down yourself. But coming back to I would say writing books, for example, I think a lot of people assume that authors are just naturally disciplined or, naturally inspired. But, I can say for the same that it's not because, I come from, so I am a music producer as well. And, there are these instances in our process, which we call the writer's block, right? So, what's the biggest misconception? That you think people have about writing a book in general?
I think a big misconception is how you need to like people think you have to sit down and you have to outline everything. And maybe that does work for some people, but a good book just grows organically. Like you create the universe, you create some characters, but then you just see what happens. And then you write down what you see. I mean, if you sit down and actually outline things very carefully, which is what most people do, you end up having something that's fake. It's not very immersive because you're controlling it, but the characters are the ones who are supposed to control.
Hmm. So, I mean, what's the contrary of it? I mean, how do you approach, jotting down the plot, Richard, if I ask you? What's your take on that? How do you make it more immersive, as you see? And this is for all the maybe, aspiring writers or authors who are listening to this right now.
Well, for me, it's kind of easy because I'm crazy. I have actually a few things wrong that actually got me kicked out of the military. But the advantage is all this stuff is just kind of created in my head, in my subconscious or whatever. And then I see it as if I'm seeing it for the first time, and then I just write it all down. My advice for writers that don't suffer from that would be to just focus on the characters. People focus on the plot, and that's a mistake. You focus on the characters. The characters create the plot organic. That's what makes it immersive.
Wow, I love that piece of advice. Quite frankly speaking, I have not heard that one before. So you're saying creating characters is so much more important than creating plot. And I think that's a new perspective. I would say that I have about now books in general. But Richard, when you look back, what do you really think shaped your voice as a writer? Was it life experience, certain people, perhaps the books that you read when you were in high school, or something else?
Well, I guess there's been a lot of things here and there that have shaped the way I write. My military experience helped me to be very realistic when I'm doing action scenes and things like that. But to be completely honest, a lot of my writing is psychological. It gets into the dark places of the psyche as well as the physical world. And I know my own. I suffered through my own mental health journey, and as from the perspective of a victim, I know how to write those scenes very carefully. And that's the kind of stuff you don't see in entertainment, either because people are too scared to write it or they simply don't know how. And I've gotten a lot of feedback on how amazed people are by how brutally detailed the psychological element of the books are. That's also why they're geared for adults. Children should not be reading.
Yeah, and not that they would be able to understand. I mean, even if they do the nuances of what you're describing. So, walk me into your writing life a little, Richard. What tends to happen when you sit down to write on a hard day? Uh, when there's nothing that comes to your mind, you're distracted or maybe tired. Do you still force yourself to write, or you say no, I won't today because I'm not just feeling it, perhaps.
Well, the stuff in my head never stops. So the ideas and the desire to write and the plot lines and all of the books and background information, it never stops in my head. When I sit down to actively write, like actually like typing on the computer or whatever, I can finish a book in like 5 weeks. But everything else gets shut out. So I actually intentionally try to take large periods of time in between because I have my own family and other responsibilities to focus on, and all those responsibilities fade away when I actually start typing.
I mean, that's phenomenal. Actually, finishing a book in 5 weeks is what you're saying. With your responsibilities added on. I mean, you indeed are a crazy person, Richard, in that context. But I mean, I don't think that is perhaps the same for everyone, Richard. To be honest, from what I assume about authors in general. So, what's your take on that? I mean, when you're having a writer's block, because I hear this question a lot often, and the interesting part is everyone has a different approach to how they confront writer's block, right? Uh, and there's this interesting perspective that I saw a YouTube video on wherein the narrator says that when you're in that writer's block zone, um, it is happening because you have run dry basically out of all inspirations, right? And the only way out is to uh you know consume more content, consume more of the art, consume of more of what you do. But what's your take on that generally?
Well, I've never come anywhere close to having writer's block. I honestly don't. I mean, I understand what it is, I guess, but I don't really understand it. I got so many for me, it never stops. I mean, I could write another 15 books and I still have stuff that I need to write down. The closest thing to writer's block I've ever had is sometimes I'm not sure how to write something, but like I know what I want, but sometimes it takes a little while to figure out how to actually put it down on paper. I don't think it's the same thing, but that's the biggest struggle I've ever had.
So what's been one of the hardest moments perhaps in your writing journey, something that made you question the work maybe, or even question yourself, if this is something worth putting out, and what helped you stay with it?
I guess one of the hardest parts is like I said before, my books go all the way to both extremes. And sometimes when you're writing something that's like extremely dark, it is a little bit difficult because it affects you personally, especially when you're writing from personal experience. I know that the most recent book that got published, Broken Angel, was extremely difficult for me to write because of how bad things got for the characters. I'm writing things like crucifixion and suicide and stuff like that. And it's hard to write.
Because there's a lot to imagine from that context, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it takes you to a lot of dark places, especially when you're the one creating it. So sometimes, like, I would just have to stop, just shut everything down, take a break for a few weeks before I could come back and write more.
Yeah, that I think that really does a nice reset, indeed, too. Uh, I mean, that's a good I would say suggestion to all of the listeners who are listening to this right now. So just before we wrap up this conversation, Richard, someone listening to this feels like they have something inside them, kind of a good story, or message, a creative dream maybe, but they feel stuck, like you say, right? Sometimes that you don't know how to jot it down on the paper. What would you want to say to them? Could you share your creative process, maybe, so that people could relate?
I would say if you're somebody, if you feel like you have a story that you need to tell, then don't get wrapped up about how to do it. Just write it all down. And then once you've written it all down, you can go back through it and you can make little changes here and there because maybe it doesn't make any sense, but it's fine because what you wrote down came through you, and then you can adjust it afterwards. Just don't get hung up around the axle about, oh, it might not sound good. No, just write it. Just write it, then take a look at it, and you can make adjustments.
So it's reiteration that helps with the content. Got it. So I think that's pretty much, I would say, the perfect note to wrap this conversation up on as well. So for the listeners who are listening to this right now, when you're thinking about writing, I want you to approach it from the perspective that it isn't just a skill. I think it's a relationship with your own story. And when I say your own story, I really mean your inner life. And I think it gets stronger when you keep showing up with honesty. So that's the thought that I would like you all to sit with for a few minutes as we wrap up this conversation. And Richard, for listeners who actually want to explore your books, and I mean, who are really into the genres you mentioned and follow your work, perhaps, where's the best place for them to find you at? And is there one book you would recommend that they would start first with?
Well, I mean, the book to start first would always be book one. I mean, I write two different series, and you don't want to start in the middle. So you definitely want to, I mean, you're definitely gonna want the first one. And if you're big on fantasy, you're gonna want Wolves and Ravens, the First Law. That's the first book. If you're big in things that are happening in the modern day, like the real world and science fiction, then you're gonna want to go over to Eternal Nights. The first book there is Redemption. And all of my stuff is, of course, on Amazon, but I have my own website, www.richardspiegel.com. There is a lot of content. Every one of my books was given a movie trailer. There's lots of other videos. My Instagram is at Richard Spiegel Books, but I know a lot of my target age group isn't really big on Instagram, so that's why I focus on my website.
Perfect, brilliant. Thanks for breaking it down so clearly, Richard. And yeah, I think that really gives a path to all the bookworms out there who are into relevant genres as well. And yeah, definitely, I would link that you link your website as well on the show notes. So could you just perhaps mention the website so that I could jot it down?
www.richardspiegel.com.
All right, and they could just get the book from there, right?
Yeah, there's purchase links all over it, but I recommend the website primarily because of all the content. There's lots of videos on that website, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and a lot of links to other interviews that I've done as well.
Brilliant. Would include that in the show notes. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in today onto this episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. And Richard, thank you so much for breaking the human side of writing into the room. I think there's something special about when I get to interact with authors in general and get to know about what their thought process really is when they're jotting something down. I think that makes the conversation all the way more entertaining. So thanks to you for joining with us on this conversation. And to everyone listening, if you have been waiting to begin or to begin again, let this be your reminder that progress doesn't require perfection from day one. I think it requires consistency from day one. And if this episode gave you something, maybe a little clarity or calm or a nudge to keep going, perhaps with the plot that you are developing, I just want you to follow Healthy Mind, Healthy Life for more conversations that support your mind and everyday life. This has been Sayan, and I'll meet you in the next one. Take care of yourself.